Hey, thanks, guys. So let me start with a purely hypothetical situation that I pose to you. So let's imagine there's a room of HR executives who need to be healthier, not the absolute bastions of health that I see before me here, that people actually want to improve their health and they're not already perfectly healthy. But if you imagine that we sort of say, okay, I want to get healthy, and you sort of gather some advice on what one needs to do, if we sort of rewind about 30 years ago in 1984, and you said, I want to be healthy, someone would say, well, first and foremost, if you want to eat healthy, don't eat many grains, but do eat a lot, don't eat much fat, and do eat plenty of grains. Do eat plenty of sort of good, healthy grains, and don't eat any fat, because that'll make you die early, and that'll make you unhealthy. And if you said, I want to do some exercise, they'd say, well, you should probably go for a long, slow jog and do lots of mileage, because that's healthy exercise, that's good for you. And as you can see here, this was the cover of Time magazine in 1984, basically saying, don't eat fat. This was the trend of jogging that had just begun as a sort of very popular way of doing exercise in 1984. But then if we fast forward 30 years, we actually see the entire opposite. When you ask someone, hey, I want to be healthy, I say, well, don't eat many grains, but do eat plenty of fat, that's fine, but make sure you don't eat too many carbohydrates, too many grains. And if you say you want to do exercise, say, well, don't go for a long, slow run. Actually, you should probably do a sort of 20-minute high-intensity interval class or whatever's currently popular as a sort of form of exercise nowadays. So there's this absolutely polar spectrum of what's considered sort of healthy advice. And it poses quite a difficult question when we say, well, how do we give healthy advice to a workforce, to an end user? How do we tell them what's the best way to be healthy? Because actually the advice is constantly shifting and people are quite confused. We often sort of consider, what does our friend do? They look like they're in good health, maybe I'll follow their advice. Or I read this recently, I'm going to follow their advice. And so it's quite a difficult concept to sort of have someone latch onto, say, what should I follow as healthy advice? And that sort of spans the whole kind of well-being spectrum. If we sort of say, well, we are all different. We know if everybody in this room ate the same food, did the same exercise day to day, we would see individual differences from person to person in how they responded to that change or that exercise change. But we are all given the same advice. So our advice is generally built off an average of, okay, this is the kind of food we should eat, this is the dosage of a certain vitamin we should all aim for, this is the kind of exercise we should aim for. And giving a sort of, let me give a very specific high-level illustration of this and why perhaps the concept of the average is something we need to try and break free of. In my previous career, as Maggie kindly alluded to, I was an Olympic athlete. I ran the 400 metres for Great Britain, and in my career I had some success, and I had a lot of not-so-success as well. And it was that not-so-success, shall we say, that really led me to really learn kind of what worked for me and what didn't, even at this very niche activity of running the 400 metres, one lap of the track, amongst 10 other or 8 other very also elite 400 metre runners. So to give you one example, even my success in my career wasn't a success at the time. So I finished 4th in the Beijing Olympic Games in 2008. And then only last year that 4th became 3rd after the Russian team ahead of us were retrospectively disqualified. So even when I won my Olympic medal, it took me 9 years to actually get that Olympic medal after I ran the race. So I found out the hard way that actually there's not always just correct average advice. There is not necessarily one piece of advice that we can give to say this is the exercise you should follow, this is the health action you should follow, these are the kind of foods you should eat. And let me show you an example of that. So there's me in 2008. That's the Beijing Olympic Games. I was just coming into the last 100 metres of a 400 metre race. And if I may say so, I think I'm looking in quite good shape. I'm sort of, quite focused in my hair. I'm not too sort of straining. I don't look like I'm under too much duress. And that was actually on the way to my fastest ever race in my career of under 45 seconds. If anyone knows the 400, you'll hopefully have no idea that that's quite quick. If we fast forward 4 years, I'll show you a picture which paints a different story. Now, I didn't follow what was considered the correct training plan at this time. I'm from Manchester in the north of England. I had a really old school coach who would smoke 40 fags a day and say, yeah, we'll just go for a long run, lads. We'll do lots of distance. And And it was quite successful, guys. I won an Olympic medal, right? So, but it was considered too old-fashioned. It was considered the wrong way. It would be what's considered the low-fat diet now is considered the wrong way nowadays, but it was the right way previously, right? If I fast forward to 4 years after that, when I was doing the correct training advice for 400 meters, which was more sprint-based training, you'll see I didn't quite look in as good a shape. So the correct training plan, the more considered average, correct, orthodox training plan, was much less effective and actually missed out on the Home Olympic Games in London 2012. And it was after that failure, should we say, that actually I tried to discover why certain things worked for me and didn't. And this was a crucial thing. There's a gene called the ACTN3 gene, the way I'm made. And you can have one of 3 versions of this gene, the CC, CT or TT version. And basically, every Olympic sprinter in the world has one of those 2 on the left, CC or CT. And I didn't have it. I was in this 1% of Olympic level sprinters who have been found without this gene. This gene plays a crucial role in the way you respond to sprint training. Now, it's very niche. Let's extrapolate that out to health and the need for this. So, coffee. We all know we have a very different response to coffee. Some people can drink loads of it and still sleep. I'm one of those. Some people can't. And it's very confusing to know if that's even healthy. So this is the Mail Online, 3 months apart, I think. Don't drink coffee, or do drink coffee, don't drink coffee. Coffee will make you die early, coffee will make you live forever. There's an entirely different piece of advice based on that. And to give you an example of that, there's another, luckily there's a gene, what a surprise. But there's a gene, the CYP1A2 gene, and with this gene you can either have what's called the fast version or the slow version of that gene. But the average advice is set down the middle. So if we look at here, the relative risk of heart attack, this study, from excess coffee intake. So this was up to 2 to 3 cups of coffee a day in the top left. This was the average advice. Relative risk of myocardial infarction and heart attack was okay, but when they went above 4 cups, their risk was increased, right? So significantly increased. However, when they split them out by genotype, you can see that slow metabolizers, even at the 2 to 3 cups of coffee a day, their risk was significantly higher. At 4+, it was really high. But for the fast metabolizers, happy days, same risk regardless of the amount of coffee they drink. And there's no middle ground on this gene. You either have the fast version or you don't. So the way we approach healthy advice fundamentally has a personalisation role that we need to consider. So this seems like very futuristic technology, but actually it's already here, and it's because of the reduction in cost. The cost of a genome sequence has come down 99% in the last 15 years. So it's much, much more affordable than it ever was. Now it's around 100 to 200 pounds rather than 10,000, 100,000. And you can see here that there's been millions of DNA tests sold by sort of consumer genetics. So the interest is there. People want to know more about their health data. It used to be the only person that knew about your health was your doctor on your notes under lock and key. Nowadays, people interact with their health data every day. Like Alistair was saying, it's about how you see that on your smartphone. So the appetite is there. It's no longer an early adopter. It's the early majority, if you will, and we need to consider that. So when we talk about managing the health of a workforce and preventing the lifestyle diseases of type 2 diabetes, COPD, etc., we have to think about how we can engage people in the correct advice for them, not just the average. So there's a whole spectrum to personalisation through DNA technology, from the heavy end of sort of cancer screens, how you interact with certain pharmaceutical drugs, your lifestyle disease risk, to the sort of lifestyle and well-being end of nutrition and fitness and digital wellness. And we have to sort of move away and reframe that conversation to say, well, we know there's an average advice, and that's fine if you're the average. If you're not the average, we need to know that too, so we can better deviate and personalise from the average advice to give more effective advice for the individual. So it's all about sort of how can we get to this bottom left from the top left. So we're following sort of giving people better information about their health. Genetics is one of the factors there, blood markers, anything else that you measure around your stress, etc., into giving them that power to make better educated decisions about what they do. And there's really good evidence showing that adherence to dietary advice, for example, is much stronger over a longer period of time when you have genetic data as opposed to without, because it makes sense. If you know the why behind when you make a decision, then you're more likely to do that more often, rather than just being prescribed a piece of advice. So when we think about this, I just want people to think about the advice we give, especially in a workforce setting. How can we make that better? How can we give better suited advice to individuals, because our employees are individuals and they will have individual responses to even the most sort of basic of things, such as drinking a cup of coffee. So good food for thought for you there. Thank you so much. I think we'll probably be very short on time for many questions, but you'll tell me, Maggie, whether I'm allowed. And otherwise, we'll be outside anyway. Please do come up, and we can even do a live gene test on any of you to see if you've got what's called the super taster gene. So do come over if you want afterwards. So yeah, thank you so much, guys.